Hey everyone, it's Finn the Panther, and if you've been following the channel or my other social media accounts, you might have seen the recent short-form video series I did on fursuits called Furry for 40. It was 40 straight videos talking all about fursuits, each going over a specific topic and explaining it for you all. And while having a playlist of all 40 videos is great, some of y'all wanted all of the videos in one supercut so you could binge them all at the same time. So that's what this is, all 40 of the videos in the series in one big video here on YouTube. There'll be chapters if you want to skip around to different days, but without further ado, here is 40 for 40, all about fursuits. I hope you enjoy. Alright, so one of my favorite questions I get asked by people who are new to my content is quite simple. What the heck am I wearing? Welcome to day 1 of Furry for 40, a series where I explain something about the furry fandom for, well, in this case, 40 days straight. What did I get myself into? This time, we're talking all about fursuits, which is a term that we use in the fandom to describe what I'm wearing. And they have that special name because they are indeed special, a lot more than something like a mascot. Alright, you can come back in closer now. Mascots are typically costumes of a character that is tied to a business or other franchise and are meant to represent whatever they're tied to. Whereas fursuits are tied to us. They are the physical embodiment of our personas and allow us to get as close as possible to actually being our furry identities. And because they're custom built for our personas, these things are basically wearable pieces of art, each of them handcrafted and created from the ground up, not stamped out in a factory somewhere. Now, these things are so special that I can't possibly fit everything about them in this one video. So for the next 39 days, we're going to dive in as deep and as broad as we can about the topic of fursuits. And I'm going to be talking this fast in each of them too, so strap in. But this should at least get you started. To answer your question, I'm wearing the physical artistic rendition of my anthropomorphic animal self, otherwise known as a fursuit. So last time we talked about what a fursuit is, but naturally the follow-up question is, why? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 2 of talking all things fursuits, and let's explore the point of dressing up like this. Because let's not kid ourselves here. This is freaking weird. A full-grown adult dressing up as a fictional anthropomorphic animal is an odd thing to do, not to mention all the money and the time that goes into investing to do so. But it is so worth it for so many people in the fandom, myself included clearly, for a variety of different reasons. For many furries, our personas are idealized versions of ourselves, and putting on a fursuit allows us to play with the personality we want to have in a more fun and controlled environment. This is especially true for those with social aspirations. Putting on a fursuit can add that barrier that allows people to feel more open and comfortable socializing, which in turn builds up that confidence to do it out of suit. And I think this one goes a little understated more than it should, but this is just fun to do. Dressing up, playing make-believe, and portraying a character, those are all activities that bring people joy, and there's nothing better than seeing someone's face light up when you interact with them in suit. And this barely even scratches the surface of why furries get these things, but hopefully as the days go on in the series, more and more reasons start to reveal themselves as we explore these weird, wonderful pieces of art. If you've looked up any pictures of furries, you'll see a bunch of them in fursuits, but other than the color and the species, you might realize that they're not all the same. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 3, and let's talk about the different types of fursuits there are. Now, at the end of the day, a fursuit is a fursuit, a physical embodiment of a persona, but there are a couple of different ways that idea is expressed that furries can choose while still all being called a fursuit. For example, I have a full suit, which means every part of my body is covered by this furry, wearable carpet. And before you ask, yes, it is hot in here. But not all fursuits are like this. Some are what we call partial fursuits, where the wearer only puts on the head, paws, and tail. This actually adds a lot of optionality on what you wear, so if your persona has a sense of fashion, you can really show it off here. And it doesn't just stop there. In many cases, just having a head is enough to qualify as a fursuit. And due to things like cost and heat tolerance, it's where a lot of furries start their fursuiting journey. And there are a couple of options in between, like paws having sleeves or just having hand paws and not feet paws. Just know that if you're interested in getting a fursuit for yourself, you're not just limited to the full thing, and you can build up over time. That's the cool thing about something as custom as this. You have options. So yesterday we talked about some different fursuit styles, but we missed one important piece where things can change about fursuits as well. The legs. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 4 of talking all things fursuits, and let's talk about fursuit legs. While things like the head and the paws take up most of the visual attention of fursuits, the legs have a huge impact on how the fursuit looks overall. There are a couple of ways that fursuit legs can be customized, mainly separated into two categories, plantigrade and digitigrade styles. And yes, that's how they are pronounced. It's not plantigrade or digigrade, it's plantigrade and digitigrade. Got it? Good. Plantigrade legs are legs that are straight, meant to resemble the way that humans look when they're walking. That's what I have. While digilegs have more of a bend integrated into the leg itself to simulate the back legs of most mammals. Now there's pros and cons to each. Plantigrade legs don't look as visually interesting but are much easier to walk around in and pack. And while dealing with the foam padding and the extra bulk can be annoying, for many furs the look of digilegs is totally worth the trade-off. And there's a bunch of other styles of legs that fursuits can have, from slim digi that make the leg curves not as pronounced, to quad suits where both the arms and the legs are used to make the suit look like it walks on all fours naturally. All in all, it may not seem like it at first, but choosing how you want your legs to look can make a big difference in how your fursuit looks overall. We've been talking all about how fursuits are put together these past few days, but we haven't discussed something that's around the back. The tail. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 5 and let's talk about these tails, shall we? I think there's a lot of confusion on how these things are attached to the rest of the suit. And you know what? That's a fair question to have. If you think about it, this is the only part of the suit that is not directly enveloping a real body part underneath. It sucks, but we as humans aren't blessed with real tails. Now again, every fursuit is different, but my tail is detachable from the bodysuit and kept up by a belt. I have what's called a ratchet belt, but really any belt that's comfortable to wear will do. But I just feed it through these holes and around my waist, which keeps it up through the hole in my suit where my tailbone is. Now that's just how my bodysuit works. I've seen many suits where the tail is just a part of the body itself, kind of like my Kigu. And different sized tails will have different needs as well. This flimsy belt might not be enough to support those long, thicker tails, but if all you have is a little nub, you might not need much support at all. Either way, since it's one of the few body parts we actually don't have in reality, figuring out tails for our suits takes some extra ingenuity to put together. Let's talk about my personal favorite part of fursuits, the paws. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 6 of talking all things fursuits, and other than the head, the hallmark feature of most fursuits are definitely the paws. They are the replacement for our hands and our feet, and we know how important those are, so it makes sense that a lot of attention is given to getting these things right. But that doesn't mean they can't be customized, as there's a lot of things that you can do with the paws to make them special. For my hand paws, I have 4 semi-plush fingers, where I actually put 2 of my real fingers into one of these holes in here, and the fingers and claws themselves are plush and soft. But there are many ways to do hand paws. You can have 5 fingers, even more plush material where you can't even close them. You can have hard plastic claws instead of soft ones like these, hooves or talons, it's all up to your species. Same goes for my feet paws. Mine actually have a shoe inside of them where my real foot slides into so I can walk around, and instead of having the paw pads, I have a more rubbery foam material that's a lot better to walk on and get dirty than the fur of these paws. That being said, I do have some other feet paws being worked on right now that do have the furry underside, and all the other changes and shape changes on the hand paws can be applied to the feet paws as well. Now, if you know me, you know I could talk about paws for days. Seriously, I'm kind of obsessed with them. But just know when it comes to these things, you have options on how you want your paws to work with your suit. All right, so after what is this, the most common question I get about my fursuit and fursuiting in general is quite simple. Where do I get one of these things? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 7 talking all things fursuits, and because these things are so special, getting a fursuit isn't as easy as ordering a costume off of Amazon. Remember, these things are pieces of art, so in most cases you actually have to commission one to be made custom for you. Now, there are a bunch of fursuit makers out there, and if you want to start a list of makers you like, check out the bio of pictures of suitors that you see on social media. Many of them will tag their makers in there. Then, when you get to that list, be sure to check things other than their gallery, like their prices, turnaround time, and other things that fit into your budget and time frame. And be on the lookout for those little things as well, like if they've done characters of your species before, or if you could commission a head and finish the bodysuit later. And while fursuits definitely are expensive, as we'll get into why in a later video, there are so many good makers these days that are a lot cheaper than you might think they should be. It just takes some time to find those diamonds in the rough. Now, there's a lot more that goes into getting a suit for your character that we'll be going over in the next few days, but if you're still in the inspiration phase, take some time to do some research for some makers that really fit your style. Commissioning a fursuit is a pretty involved process, but let's say you have at least a few makers that you really like and are ready to get the process started. Where to next? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 8 of talking all things fursuits, and as we continue our discussion of commissioning a fursuit, preparing the commission itself can make or break your chances of getting picked. In fact, let's start there. Even if you have a perfect commission application, there are still more people who want fursuits than those who make them, so you're not guaranteed to get a slot in your dream maker's commissions. In this case, you can either wait until they open up again, which may be a whole year later, or have a couple of backup options that you will be just as happy with. But once that's decided, there's one thing you absolutely need in order to submit a commission: a ref sheet of your character. This is what your maker will be basing your suit on, so make sure that the ref is fursuit ready, meaning there's a clear view of the front, back, and sides, the colors are clearly listed, and it's not shaded. Once you have that, be sure to read your maker's terms of service so you know what you're getting into, and fill out your application completely. The more details, the better. Then it's just a matter of waiting to see if you get accepted, which hopefully you do. Oh, just a little tip that may or may not be from experience: be sure to check your spam folder just in case. You don't want to miss out on a brand new fursuit opportunity because your email service guessed incorrectly. Let's say you're working on getting a fursuit and you get accepted by your dream maker. Congratulations, your fursuit is one step closer to becoming a reality, but there's just one problem. How are you going to pay for it? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 9 talking all things fursuits, and let's not sugarcoat things here. Fursuits are expensive, and rightfully so. These things are literally luxury goods, and there is a lot of time, material, and labor costs that goes into making these custom pieces of art from the ground up. Add that to the fact that the demand for fursuits is outpacing the supply of new makers out there, and the result is the price of fursuits is only going to continue to increase over time. This makes paying for one a particularly important step in the process, but in most cases, you have a couple of options. In a perfect world, the best thing you could do is just pay for it all up front, using money that you've already set aside or have been saving up for the past in preparation for this large purchase. But that's not always necessary. Fursuit makers know how much of a cost these things are and offer some flexibility in payment. Many will ask for a certain percentage down to accept your commission into the queue and ask for the rest when they start working on your suit. Others will set up a payment plan that allows you to spread out your payments over time. Either way, just due to their costs, a fursuit is not something you should commission if you're not financially ready for it. The last thing you want is to go into debt for a luxury item. So while it's easy to get up in the excitement of getting a fursuit, being ready to take the financial hit it takes to get one should be a prerequisite before anything else. So fursuits are neat because they're custom tailored to fit around you and around you only. But getting them that perfectly fit sometimes takes a little bit more than just your body measurements. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 10 of talking all things fursuits, and to get a fursuit to fit you, a lot of makers need not just a reference of your character, but a reference of your body. And the tool of choice for this body reference is called a duct tape dummy, or a DTD. These things sound pretty weird because they are. Basically, you wear a very thin base layer over your body, usually something like a painter suit, and you have someone place strips of duct tape all over you in the shape of your body. And when your entire body is covered, you get carefully cut out of your cocoon, and what remains is a reference that your fursuit maker will build your suit around. Now again, it's a weird, silly process, but taking it seriously is actually very important. Remember, this is the body your suit is built around, so if it's not done correctly, the dimensions of your fursuit might not fit, and in most cases, there's little that can be done about that once it's made. So get a couple of friends that you trust will take it seriously, and that you are comfortable with them touching some sensitive areas, which they'll have to get your bodysuit right. Now, some makers don't require this, and they can just go off a number of measurements, but I'd still recommend you get a friend to do those so you can focus on standing still. Alright, so far, how we've been talking about getting a fursuit assumes you're commissioning it from a maker, but what if you want to make it yourself? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 11 of talking all things fursuits, and you'd be surprised how many fursuits you see in the fandom are actually made by the wearer themselves. And it makes sense. In most cases, the biggest thing that you're saving when you make your own fursuit is costs. Kind of. Since you are taking up the labor costs for yourself, all you have to pay is for the material and time. Though if you're just starting out, that trial and error phase might get a bit expensive. That being said, there's never been a better time to try out making your own suit. From the availability of base materials to all the tutorials that there are online, with enough patience, you can put together your own suit that looks fantastic. Now, like I said, this only works if you have the time and patience for this endeavor. And if you're like me and not very handy, offloading that cost to someone who has done it before might be more than worth it. But I don't know, there's just something satisfying about building something from the ground up just for yourself. and many people who make their own suits feel the same. Plus, if you get really good at it, you can turn it into a business and make some pretty good money in this fandom, where suit demand is basically inelastic. So while it may be intimidating to start, making your own suit can be extremely rewarding and a whole lot lighter on your wallet. So I hate to break it to you, but yeah, unfortunately, this isn't real fur, which means taking care of it is a lot more important than you might think. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 12 of talking all things fursuits, and let's talk about caring for this fur. Like I mentioned, this is all synthetic, which is just a fancy way of saying that this fur doesn't grow back when it falls off. So taking care of it and making sure it lasts a long time quite literally makes a difference in how long a suit of fur lasts itself. And the biggest recommendation that I can give to keeping your fur in good shape is by brushing it. Brushing your fur regularly keeps it from getting tangled or stuck together, which makes the individual fur pieces more resilient to general stress. So before you put it on to perform, after you take it off, and if you have some free time while you have it on, give it a quick brush to get the fur back in line in the suit itself. And there's other obvious things you can do to keep this fur in good shape, including washing your suit correctly, which we'll get into in another video, keeping it away from things that can stain it, and other just general maintenance. But I'll be honest, brushing your suit regularly can make the difference between a suit lasting a year or 10. As fun as it sounds, you're not going to be wearing your fursuit absolutely all of the time. But when you're done, you gotta put it somewhere, right? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 13 of talking all things fursuits, and let's talk about something that doesn't come up a lot when discussing these things: where to store them. We spent the last couple of videos talking about how important it is to keep the fur in good standing, and in order to do that for an extended period of time, you need to put your fursuit away just as carefully. Now, best case scenario, you should hang up your fursuit, preferably on a thick hanger or a couple of hangers that evenly distribute the weight of the bodysuit. This way you don't cause any creases in any of the folds, and with the weight evenly distributed along the hanger, none of the seams around here will get pulled too tightly. But if you do have to put it in some kind of container, try to keep the folds as even as possible, and be sure to brush the suit beforehand so the fur settles as evenly as possible as well. Then make sure you put it in a cool, dry space away from anything that could spill or stain the suit, and it should be good for storage. One of the biggest factors that prevent people from fursuiting for a long time is heat. So let's talk about how to handle it. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 14, and there's no way to sugarcoat this. It gets hot while you fursuit. Even if you just wear the head, the internal temperature in here can reach well past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you add all the heat you generate from performing in suit, heat exhaustion and even heat stroke are unfortunately common dangers of fursuiting. But there are ways to avoid something that drastic, and it all has to do with helping your body manage its temperature. There are a couple of things you can do, starting with passive heat management. This includes wearing things like compression clothing and a balaclava over your head. We'll talk about the specifics of what these do in a future video, but they help your body manage your heat by absorbing sweat and keeping your entire body a consistent temperature. Then there are more active ways to cool yourself down. Many fursuiters will add a fan somewhere in their head to keep air circulating around. There are also phase change cooling vests that will hold a cool temperature while you suit, allowing your overall body temperature to be lower than without it. And sometimes it's really simple. For me, just moving around in here keeps air moving through my eyes. So if you just see me randomly moving around at a con, I'm not antsy. It's literally just me trying to keep things as cool as possible in here. So before you go out and suit, be sure to have the proper temperature management systems in place to keep things just warm and not so hot that it causes you to overheat. So yesterday we talked about ways to keep yourself from overheating while performing in suit, and I want to highlight one key tool that helps us do just that. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 15 of talking all things fursuits, and let's talk about compression clothing. These flimsy, thin items of clothing are actually super crucial to furries fursuiting for an extended period of time, especially those with bodysuits. These are specifically designed to wick sweat, which means they transfer sweat from your body to the outer layer of this piece of clothing, allowing it to evaporate a lot faster. This helps regulate your body temperature a lot more than sweating directly into the fursuit, which will give your sweat no chance to escape. Now, there are a couple of brands that make these types of clothes, but the gold standard in this community is Under Armour Heat Gear. And don't be fooled by the name. The heat gear helps keep you cool and the cold gear helps keep you warm. I'm not in marketing, I don't get it either. This is what I wear every time I put on my suit. And yeah, they're not cheap, but they are a requirement for me for fursuiting, especially for the lengths of time that I like to fursuit. I cover my entire body in these: legs, upper body, head, and even hands. Anything that I know that tends to sweat a lot. Thankfully, they're so thin that I barely remember I'm wearing them after a while, but they do wonders to keep myself and many other fursuiters' internal body heat controlled while we're out fursuiting. So about a month ago, I made a video about this new hanger I bought meant to dry my fursuit after performing in it. And after using it regularly for the past few weeks, here's what I think of it. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 16 of talking all things fursuits, and let's talk about this thing because, in short, I love it. As simple as it is, it's just a big hanger with a fan. This fan works really well in drying my suit after I spray it down with fursuit spray. Before, if I got in my suit after a long session, the insides would still be damp from the spray, but now it's bone dry. But let's talk about this hanger itself. It's big and wide, which means it's actually really great for hanging up my suit and evenly distributing the weight of the suit so no seams are pulling on it as well. And it sounds simple, but I just feel more confident hanging my suit up on one of these instead of the regular hangers that you typically get at hotels. Now, it's not flawless. Because of its size and all dimensions, it's a bit tricky to pack and takes up a lot of space. And while the fan is super effective, I wouldn't call it quiet. But if you're looking for a faster way to dry your suit after use or a solid hanger to perch your suit on, I can't recommend one of these wetsuit hangers enough. Fursuits look great when you have them on, but when you take them off, there's a lot of stuff you need to manage. How do you move all of this around? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 17 of talking all things fursuits, and let's discuss something that doesn't always get talked about with fursuits, moving it from place to place. It's something that's important to keep in mind since there are a lot of places you'll want to get out and fursuit at. Trust me, it's a lot more fun than just keeping it here inside. So let's look at how to move this thing around safely, and your number one priority when keeping track of this thing is the head. The head is the cornerstone that makes the entire character, so if you can, keep it with you at all times. If you're traveling and limited in space, try to find a bag that can fit your head, but you can still carry around with you, while you put the rest of the body, paws, and tail in a bigger bag. Speaking of bags for the rest of your suit, you'll want something that's pretty sturdy. Now, the gold standard for this are Pelican Cases, which we'll go over tomorrow, but something like a hard shell suitcase could work as well. And with anything that you put your suit in, be sure to add some way to track it as well. Whether it's an air tag or a tile, some kind of tracker that connects to your phone can really add to your peace of mind when traveling around with your precious cargo. And it does take some extra care, but if you put it in the right containers, your fursuit should travel just fine with you in most cases. Quite literally in this case. So we've been talking about traveling with a fursuit, but the most common question I get is about flying with it. How do you fly with a fursuit? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 19 of talking all things fursuits, and flying with this fursuit is the main way that I get to a majority of the conventions that I attend. Flying to cons is a very common way to get to them, but if you just got a brand new fursuit, being concerned with the complexities of flying with it is pretty normal. That being said, I've flown tens of thousands of miles with this thing, so here's what I've learned. 1, if you can, I suggest keeping your fursuit head with you as a carry-on. You can put it in its own specialized case or just drop it in a shopping bag, but at the very least, this will at least be at your side the entire time that you fly. 2, if you are checking a bag, make sure there's nothing in here that causes airport security to open it, because there's no guarantee that they'll put things back the way they found it. 3, make sure the flight is as simple as possible. I don't mind paying a bit extra for direct flights to cons since these bags are dropped off at one location and picked up at another. But if you do have a layover, do your best to have the time between transfer flights long enough for baggage attendants to transfer your bag to your new flight. Now, I'm not going to say that the chances of your bag being lost or damaged aren't zero, but these statistics are well on your side. While it is a valid concern, if you prepare for your trip well enough, I could say with a good amount of confidence that the case carrying your fursuit has an excellent chance of getting there and back as you expected. If you've traveled to furry conventions, you might have seen a bunch of these big boxes rolling around carrying fursuits. And if you think they all kind of look the same, it's because they are. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 18, and let's talk about these popular fursuit cases. These are called Pelican Cases, named after the brand that makes them, and their main feature is that they're very, very sturdy. You could drop, throw, kick, stab these things and it won't break a sweat, and they're designed for things that need extra protection when traveling, like cameras or firearms. But they have become quite popular in our community for carrying fursuits. Combining their structural integrity with their size, many furries will put their entire suit in here for travel. including me. Now, there are a bunch of models out there. I have the Pelican Storm IM2975, and I got it because it fits everything in here, including my head, meaning my entire fursuit is in one safe box. And even though it is technically oversized from a check-in bag standpoint, it's only off by a few inches, and airlines in the US are much more concerned about weight, which with everything in here is still only 30 pounds. So I recommend it if you want to put everything in one case, and sure, they're not cheap, but they act as a little bit of insurance to ensure that no matter how this bag gets handled, your fursuit gets to your destination safe and sound. It is honestly comfortable in here. I could easily take a nap. So as we wrap up our little discussion on traveling with your fursuit, there's one last thing I want to review when it comes to bringing your fursuit to different places. The accessories. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 20 of talking all things fursuits, and while your suit is the main attraction, there are a few things that are good to bring with you to keep it in its best shape while traveling. And that of course starts with a good brush. This is a key for keeping your fur from getting matted and tangled, and makes you look a lot better in pictures and feel a lot better when going in for hugs. Secondly, you're gonna need some kind of fursuit spray. This cleaning solution helps keep bacteria from building up inside your suit and making it tough to clean, or even worse, making you smell bad. Along with this, to help with keeping your sweat out of your suit, be sure to bring a few pairs of compression clothes. I'm at the point where I bring one set per day of suiting, but having at least a couple full sets should keep you taken care of. And finally, we've discussed how hot suiting is, so I'd recommend a fan as well. It can be a small one to keep with you while you suit, or it can be a big one to dry your suit after a long session, or it can be both. But no matter what you have, some kind of fan will be crucial for keeping any dampness away from your suit. And obviously there's a lot more that you can bring for shooting, but those 5 should keep you taken care of and ready for a few days of fursuiting adventure. If you're walking around a furry convention and see a bunch of fursuiters, you might notice that some of them are carrying something seemingly random with them. What are those? Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 21 of talking all things fursuits, and it's not uncommon to see fursuiters carrying or playing around with something while they're out suiting. In fact, this happens so often, these things have a name. They're referred to as Fursuit Props. Props can be any item, but usually there's something that is either a part of their character, something that invites other people to interact with them, or it could just be a comfort object that helps calm their nerves. For example, this yarn ball is a pretty popular prop for feline furries, since cats like to play with yarn. Now, even though they are a part of the suit's character, that doesn't mean that you have free reign to do whatever you want with them. These things are still their property, so you should never try to grab it, steal it, or even touch it without permission from the owner. And even if they do give you that permission, treat these props with respect. They are as much as part of the fursuit as the suit itself, and it may be a crucial part of how they want to be treated while they're out fursuiting. But when they are treated with respect, they can be a great way to enhance and add to the overall character that you are portraying in your fursuit. If you have been in the fandom for a while, you might have noticed that I do something in my suit that not all that long ago wasn't really the norm. I speak. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 22 of talking all things fursuits, and if you're watching this video, then you know that I talk while I'm in fursuit. Quite a lot. Which, like I said, if this was 5-10 years ago or so, would actually be the exception to the rule. Talking while fursuiting was actually seen as taboo in some respects in the fandom, let alone the norm. But things have changed now, and it's pretty normal to expect to talk to people while you're in suit, unless you deliberately make your character a silent suitor, which we'll go over tomorrow. It may sound simple, but talking in suit does take a little bit more effort than talking normally, mainly because your voice needs to project through this thing. It's a weird halfway point between regularly talking and outright yelling, but it's required in order for people to hear you in a crowded environment, especially if they're also wearing a fursuit. But after a while, you'll get used to the new volume that you have to project at, and it can even invite an opportunity to create a brand new voice for your suit as well, something we've talked about in a previous video. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, one of the key pieces of anthropomorphism is bringing in human features into our animal-based characters, and talking is arguably the most human thing that we can do. Yesterday, we looked at the relatively recent phenomenon of talking in suit. Now, let's talk about the opposite, not speaking at all. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 23 of talking all things fursuits, and while these days most fursuiters you will meet will be open to talking to you, some of them will not speak to you on purpose. And it's never personal or rude, it's because they have designated themselves as a silent suitor. This is the term that we give to suitors who don't speak while they're performing in their suit, and the reasons can vary from wanting to really buy into the fact that they're an anthropomorphic animal to simply not wanting to speak as loud as you need to through a fursuit head. Either way, it's their choice and should be respected when you encounter one, but it doesn't mean that you can't have the same amount of fun when interacting with them. Most of the time, silent suitors will be a lot more animated with their gestures, using their arms and paws and head to communicate with those who come up to them. Sometimes they might emit a certain sound or noise instead of full speech, and change the tone and emphasis on these noises to help with general communication. I've actually found that birds who like to silent suit do a lot of squawking around. Now, it does take a little getting used to, especially since responding with our voice is such a natural thing for us to do as people, but silent suiting can be a fun, creative way to make your fursuiting character stand out amongst the rest of us loud, blabbery suitors who choose to talk. Probably the most common place that fursuiters go out and perform is at furry conventions, but sometimes it can be fun to go out and suit in public. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 24 of talking all things fursuits, and fursuiting in public, or public fursuiting, is a common way that fursuiters get to perform in their suit outside of a convention setting. And it can be a lot of fun. Going out to a park or somewhere where you're mostly running into people who aren't furries can be a great way to surprise them and hopefully put a smile on their face. But because you are away from the controlled environment of a convention, public suiting requires a lot more precautions than usual. Because you're now going out in public, having the permission to be where you are with your suit on is a lot more important. Public places like parks are usually fine, but in any other place that is especially indoors, asking permission of that establishment is required before running around in there in suit. Also, because the public can be unpredictable, I actually don't suggest public suiting alone. Having a handler out of suit or just being around other people in suit can be really beneficial, as it can all help you all watch each other's backs and keep you all safe. Speaking of which, wherever you go out in suit in public, always have a plan to get out of suit and somewhere safe. If there's an actual emergency, you're going to need all of your senses and people to be able to identify you, which means the funny animal costume head has to come off. But the combination of the thrill of the unknown and being your character somewhere that's not a meet or a con can be a really fun way to explore the fun of being in fursuit. If you end up wearing a fursuit as much as I do, you're going to push it to its physical limit, which means it might need some time in the repair shop. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 25 of talking all things fursuits, and as incredibly built as these things are, fursuits are still physical objects, which means they're going to break down over time. Most of the time, it's the fur that you end up losing a lot of, or a seam in one of the contact points starts to rip, but doing regular maintenance on your suit is how they can last for a really long time. Now, you can get all of the materials and do this yourself. In fact, if you do this proactively, you can actually keep your suit in really good condition before it starts to lose its structural integrity. But there are ways that you could get someone who may be more familiar with fursuit upkeep to take care of it for you. Sometimes this could be a service that your maker provides, but there are other services out there ran by furries that you can ship your suit to, describe what needs to be refurbished, and they'll ship your suit back to you and have it looking just as new. It's funny, but the analogy really works here. You can really treat it like a car. With regular maintenance and general upkeep, you could keep this physical embodiment of your persona or character looking like you just took it out of the box. So you're probably used to fursuits looking pretty similar to mine, but this style is far from the only way that fursuits are designed. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 26 of talking all things fursuits, and while they are the most popular, this toony style of fursuits are not the only option to bring your character to life. Now, that's not to say it's not popular for a reason. Having these exaggerated features like these large paws and eyes helps keep the mix of human and animal playful and approachable, which is important for staying out of the uncanny valley. But that might not fit the look of a suit that you're going for, and you might have a different vision of how you want your character to be represented in real life. Thankfully, there are a lot of ways that your fursuit can be created. If you don't like this toony look, you could go the other way and get a more realistic looking suit, which, just between you and me, I actually like a lot. If you're looking for a different style other than the typical Western design of fursuits, you can get something like a kimono suit, which is a style that is a lot more attributed to Asian furry cultures. And that's if you want to keep this look of a fursuit in the first place. A lot of people will make things like paper fursuits or use things like raptor masks for their characters, versions that are a lot easier to make, a lot easier to put on and wear, and a whole lot cheaper than the whole shebang here. And new fursuit styles are coming out seemingly all of the time at different looks and price points, meaning that there should be a style that not just fits your character, but fits how you want your character to look in the real world. So it's no secret that fursuits are expensive, and that can be frustrating, but there are ways to talk about that expense without being rude to the makers. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 27 of talking all things fursuits, and I want to go over something a little different today, talking about how expensive fursuits are. I've gone to many cons where makers are selling fursuits, and I've heard some pretty nasty comments after potential customers see the price. But I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt here and hope that that was the first time them seeing something that expensive with the person who made it right in front of them. So let's go over how to process the price of fursuits in a more respectful manner. First of all, don't haggle. These aren't used cars. You have no say in how much a maker decides to charge for their art. So don't try to negotiate down a lower price. Their word is final. 2, instead of complaining that a suit is too expensive, discuss some other payment options, like putting a percentage down and paying for it over time. That's a pretty common practice for fursuit makers anyway. And finally, if the price is still out of your range, there are some ways to respectfully tell the maker that you can't afford it. Instead of making a flippant comment on how outrageous you might think the price is, you could simply say something like, "I love the suit, but it's out of my budget right now, maybe next time." Look, I get that talking about money in general is not easy for many people, but fursuit artists still deserve your respect, so be sure to be mindful about how you talk about their prices while directly in front of them. Fursuits bring our personas and characters to life, but the real world comes with some limitations that you might not be prepared for. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 28 of talking all things fursuits, and one of the first things fursuit makers look at when deciding what suits to make is what suits they could actually make. What I mean is that they will look at the design of all the character sheets that they get and see if they can actually translate that into a carefully sewn carpet. Which sounds simple, but it does mean that you have to be careful with how crazy your persona design actually is. I know it can be tempting to throw all of those cool patterns and designs into your persona, but when you take it out of the art and into the real world, not everything can or will be done by makers. So things like gradients in your fur or super intricate patterns might have to be sacrificed for the sake of your suit existing. The same goes with things like spots and rosettes. For example, real jaguars and panthers have tiny dots inside of their rosettes, but that's too small of a detail to be worth the effort. So I went with more traditional spots on my fur to still get the look. So doing things like that, finding that middle ground with your persona design is key. So when you submit your fursuit applications, they're not immediately denied due to complexity. So I've fursuited at a bunch of cons at this point, and I want to share with you some less obvious things that we as fursuiters prefer when interacting with you all. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 29 of talking all things fursuits, and while the general advice of how to interact with fursuiters is all well and good, there are some smaller things that you can do to help make the interaction with us that much more positive. Thankfully, all of them are pretty simple. In fact, the first one is very simple. Just speak up when you talk to us. It's already hard to hear with our heads on and when we're in a crowded convention space. All of the sounds kind of mush together when we're in there, so you have to be a little bit louder for us to hear you. Secondly, do your best to pick up on context clues to see if we're open to talking with people we might not know. Many of us like to hang out in groups of friends to have conversations with and might find it a little awkward if someone butts in. It's different for everyone, but a general rule of thumb that I found that works pretty well is that if you see a group of suitors walking around, feel free to come up and say hi. But if they're standing in a close-knit group, they might just want to hang out with their friends for a bit. Finally, when you do get an opportunity to speak with us, it's very refreshing to have something to say other than, "Nice suit." Many fursuiters I know actually love having conversations with people, but we kind of need something more to work with. So having an open-ended question ready will really help get our conversation going. And there's a bunch more that I could talk about, but these are 3 simple things that really can help make the fursuit interaction a lot more fun. So yesterday we talked about some not so obvious things that you could do to make fursuit interaction a lot more fun. Now let's look at the don'ts. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 30 of talking all things fursuits, and let's just get right into it. Here are 3 things that are frustrating to us as fursuiters that you might not know about. First of all, please remember that fursuit does not equal consent, and along with that, no is a complete sentence. And that goes for seemingly harmless interactions as well. For example, I don't like getting my nose booped, and it's a bit frustrating to have someone go in for a boop while they're asking permission, so please wait until you get a yes or no before coming towards us. Secondly, please don't hover around us. I don't want to call this stalking, but we can tell when someone is following behind or just to the side of us while trying not to make it obvious. And I get being shy and all, but seriously, we all suit to interact with you all, and we much rather you give saying hi a shot than than constantly wonder if you're following us around without our consent. And finally, please remember that headless lounges at cons are sacred spaces for fursuiters. We're actually going to talk about this more in a later video, but we really appreciate it if the only people in there are fursuiters themselves and their handlers. And while I don't mind a quick conversation in there, the main goal of that space is to allow fursuiters to rest, so please give them that opportunity. And just like yesterday, these are all pretty simple things, but they go a long way in making the fursuiting experience that much more enjoyable for everyone. If there's one universal truth amongst all fursuiters, it's that we love to have our picture taken. So let's talk about how to respectfully take pictures of us. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 31 of talking all things fursuits, and while we as fursuiters love having our pictures taken, it's still something that requires a bit of etiquette to do. Thankfully, they're all simple things that can make a big difference, and it starts by asking. If you want to pick up one of us, all that we ask is that you ask us, and spoiler alert, we're probably going to say yes. Secondly, and this is a big one for me personally, have your camera ready to take the picture before you ask. Remember, while we're standing around waiting for you to pull your phone out of your bag or set up your camera flash, we're getting hot in here, and it's a lot easier and faster for everyone to take the picture right after you ask. And finally, if you don't get the suitor's socials after you take the pic, post a picture up on FurTrack. It's this awesome website that allows the community to tag fursuiters with pictures taken of them, and also makes it super easy for us to find and thank you for the pictures as well. Again, these are all pretty simple things, but you'd be surprised at how much they make a difference with something that fursuiters do so much of, like taking pictures. Let's continue talking about pictures of fursuiters, and this time, let's talk about where. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 32 of talking all things fursuits, and where you take pics of fursuiters can make a big difference between something alright and something that's worth printing and framing. Now, this is a skill that you will learn with practice, but for me, the foundation of a good fursuit picture starts with the location. And the most important location for any fursuit picture is somewhere with a lot of light. And where that light is coming from is important too. You want the source to be facing the front of the suitor, not the back. So don't point your camera at the window, be behind it. Secondly, if you could get outside, getting some nature in the shot always livens up a fursuit picture. It just adds to the illusion that we're all actually animals interacting with our habitat. Though if you can't go outside easily, look for some interesting architecture indoors. Things like conventions are held at pretty interesting places, so use that to your advantage to get some cool shots. Now obviously there's a lot more that goes into getting a good fursuit picture, but starting with a good foundation of the location can make the subject of the fursuiter really stand out. You might have caught on to this, but I refer to the action of being in a fursuit as a performance, and that's not by accident. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 33 of talking all things fursuits, and it's true, being in fursuit really requires you to act. And even if you don't have an exuberant character and it's more just your personality in anthropomorphic animal form, the fact that you have to move not just your body but the suit over it requires a little bit more effort. It's not something that comes naturally to everyone though, so if you're confused on how to make things look more animated in suit, just put your words into action. If you're confused by something, tilt your head. If you're excited to see someone, bounce up and down a little bit. These little extra movements of your body really add up to someone interacting with you. And after you practice this taking words into action connection, it does become quite natural over time, and you can really tell when fursuiters are really good at it. It's almost like they don't need to talk at all when interacting with you. But as you work to getting up to that level, just putting your actions and your words in the same body expression can really sell the idea that your character is full of life. At furry conventions, there's a special place that's meant just for fursuiters, and as exclusive as that sounds, it's much more of a necessity than you might think. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 34 of talking all things fursuits, and I want to talk about Fursuit Lounges today. They are exactly what they sound like, rooms at cons where fursuiters can go and lounge around. And even though lounging sounds casual, these rooms are very important because it allows fursuiters to relax after the laborious task of fursuiting. In fact, there's two main things that most lounges have: fans to cool suitors off and water to help them rehydrate. Anyway, now there's a reason why only fursuiters and their handlers are allowed in there, and it doesn't really have to do with overcrowding, even though it kinda does implicitly. This is one of the few spaces where a majority of suitors will take their head off and otherwise expose their real identity underneath. Now we'll talk about why fursuiters want to protect their identity tomorrow, but because this is a safe space for that, the #1 rule in most lounges is no pictures. I know it's tempting to do so because all of the fursuiters are all in one place, but it can wait until we get outside, and besides, we're in a lounge. We want to relax a little bit too. So a few videos ago, I mentioned that a lot of suitors don't like to be seen with their head off. Here's why. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 35 of talking all things fursuits, and it is true, a lot of suitors don't want to reveal their real identity underneath their suit. This is actually where a lot of the origins of ideas like breaking the magic came from, and it used to be a big deal. Anything that possibly showed the real person underneath the suit was a big no-no. But even today, a lot of suitors don't want to be seen without their head or entire bodysuit on, and it's for a variety of reasons. For many, fursuiting is a way to present themselves in a way that is very different than how they actually are, and they want to keep those two identities separate. Some may not be comfortable with interacting with others in public yet without having a suit on. And for many, it's as simple as them not wanting others to know who they are and what they're doing. Though no matter what the reason, it should still be respected, which is why not taking pictures in places like Fursuit Lounges or when people are desuiting in general is such a big deal. Oh, and it's also why you won't be getting a face reveal from me anytime soon. Your first convention that you attend with your new fursuit is super exciting, but there's some important things to know to ensure that it's a success. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 36 of talking all things fursuits, and your first convention as a fursuiter is one that you'll never forget. It completely changes how you approach cons as a whole. But diving in with a fursuit that you're still figuring out can be a bit intimidating, so let's go over some things that can help make the first time really successful. First of all, utilize a handler. Handlers are there to help be your second eyes and ears and guide you around a con, allowing you to spend more time getting confidence with your limited senses. Secondly, make sure you have a good understanding of the con space itself before you go out, taking special note of where all the fursuit lounges are. And finally, stay within your comfort level. I know it can be hard, but don't be peer pressured into doing a bunch of things that you're not comfortable doing in suit. There'll be other cons to go try some crazy stuff later. And I know this sounds like a lot, but honestly, you get used to your suit pretty quickly. If you start practicing on day 1, by day 3 of a con, you'll have the hang of most things and will start to really enjoy the fun of fursuiting at a convention. Taking your new fursuit out of the box can be a transformative experience, which means it's a process you definitely want to do with care. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 37 of talking all things fursuits, and while it can be extremely tempting, ripping the box open and yanking your new fursuit out of it can do more harm than good. Something this delicate requires some extra care and checks to ensure that it's ready for you to wear. For starters, take things out of the box slowly and do your best to keep all of the wrapping and packaging for now, just in case something is off. 2, when it's time to put it on for the first time, be sure that everything fits well. Run, jump, bend, or move around as much as possible to be sure that everything feels right. And finally, give that fur its first few brushes. And don't be afraid if a bunch of fur comes off rather quickly. That's pretty normal, and it's good to get that top layer of fur off as evenly as you can. But once it's passed all of your checks, you're ready to enjoy your newly unboxed fursuit. Over the course of this series, I've gotten a lot of questions about how to keep fursuits clean, so let's address that today. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 38 of talking all things fursuits, and the curiosity of how to keep something like this clean is warranted. This thing replaces you in the real world, and the world is a very dirty place, so keeping a fursuit clean is something that everyone who has one thinks about all the time. Thankfully, it doesn't have to be all that complicated, and as long as you're prepared, keeping fursuits clean is actually pretty straightforward. Other than the general advice of brushing and using fursuit spray, honestly, the best way to keep your fursuit clean is to not leave it out. I know you may want to keep something like the head out on a table if you're at a party or something, but that makes it susceptible to anything that falls or spills on it that stains it. So the simplest advice that I can give you is to just put it away when you're done with it. But accidents still happen while you're wearing it, and if something small does get on it, you can use a general purpose spot cleaner like Folex to help wipe it off. I mean, we call these things wearable carpets for a reason. You can even clean it like one. And of course, for general cleanliness, be sure to give your suit a thorough cleaning as well. Now, this varies from suit to suit. Sometimes it's as easy as tossing it in the washing machine, while other times it might require something like a green machine, but this is something that either your maker or whomever you acquired your suit from should inform you on. And that's really all it takes to keep your colorful, wearable animal carpet looking as clean as possible. One of the reasons why I love fursuiting is due to all the good that you can do with one. And I'm not just talking about entertaining people at furry conventions. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 39 of talking all things fursuits, and there are a number of ways that you can give back to the community with your fursuit. And again, not just the local furry community either. There are a lot of ways that you can use a fursuit voluntarily to help out at different places and organizations. But if you do want to keep it in fandom, using your fursuit while volunteering at a con can be a huge help. Many cons will use fursuiters to help collect money for the charity, with the hopes that a cute fursuiter will help convince more people to donate than they otherwise would. Secondly, a common way that people give back with their fursuits is by entertaining at places like kids' hospitals. Hospitals are scary enough on their own for adults, let alone a young child, but seeing a bright, fluffy animal costume to interact with can help calm their nerves. And finally, you could use this fursuit as a mascot for education or spreading information or awareness. I actually do this indirectly with the furry informational channel that I have, but it can be for smaller campaigns as well, like encouraging people to vote. The idea is that your fursuit can be an incredible tool not just for entertainment, but for a little altruism as well. It feels appropriate to end a series talking about fursuits by discussing their future. Welcome back to Furry for 40. It's day 40, the final day of talking all things fursuits, and these things have come a long way since their first inception. But that begs the question, what's next for fursuits as a thing? I have a few predictions. First, I think suits are going to continue to evolve to be easier to wear for more and more people. I think things like the vision in the eyes will continue to get better, airflow not just through the head but through the body as well will improve, and the overall use of lighter but stronger fabrics will make these things more durable as well. Secondly, I think we're going to see more cool cyberpunk-esque evolution in the technology integrated into these things. Things like blinking eyes, speaker-enhanced speech, and fur that reacts to touch are going to be integrated into fursuits, haphazardly at first, but more elegantly over time. Now, one thing I don't foresee happening is the price of fursuits going down, and I think the community is going to combat this by making fursuits out of more readily available materials. I would not be surprised to see a new crop of fursuit makers come up that let people choose from off-the-shelf heads, bodies, and paws that they go and customize and put together for clients. Either way, fursuits will remain a cornerstone of the furry community, and while they're not for everyone and not everyone will be able to get one for themselves, I will leave you with this. If you ever get the chance to even try one on, do it. Even just a few seconds in one will reveal to you the magic that is fursuiting. Magic that has completely changed my life for the better.